Welcome to everyone joining our webinar. We'll just give it 1 or 2 minutes and then we'll get started. Okay, hello everyone. I'm very glad you could join us today for our webinar on cybersecurity in the real estate industry. My name is Tate Militana. I'll be moderating our discussion today. Before we get started, I want to provide some best practices so our session goes smoothly. Shortly, we will have a presentation from Leslie Longstreet of the Cyber Readiness Institute and a panel discussion with Leslie and Matthew Calamaldi of Stellar MLS. During the presentation and the panel discussion, all participants will be on mute so we can hear the panel clearly. Following our panel discussion, we'll have a short Q&A session. If you'd like to ask a question during Q&A, you can submit your question in Zoom via the chat or Q&A function or via Facebook. I want to thank the Realtyna team for organizing this webinar. Realtyna is a leader in real estate tech solutions for WordPress and home to organic MLS integration. And now let me introduce our panel. In her already extensive experience, Leslie has stood out as a leader and communicator working on some of the world's most important cybersecurity questions. As Global Director of Outreach and Partner Engagement at CRI, Leslie helps support small businesses to become more secure and resilient online. Leslie is also a role model, serving as a mentor for women in cybersecurity through the UN specialized agency, the ITU. Hi, Leslie, it's great to see you. The accolades for our second panelist are too long to list, but suffice it to say that we are very lucky that Matthew Calamaldi has chosen to apply his talents to the real estate sector. As a leader, published scholar, inventor, and now VP of Technology and Innovations at Stellar MLS, Matthew brings creative solutions to the most challenging problems. His data-driven approach and strategic insight helps Stellar empower agents with innovative tools and stay flexible in an ever-evolving technology environment. Hi, Matthew. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you to both our panelists for taking the time out of their busy schedules for this webinar. And with that, Leslie, I will hand the program to you.
Thank you very much, Tate, and thank you for the very elaborate introduction. I really appreciate it. So I will just go ahead and dive right in to a couple of stats that are specific to the real estate industry as far as cybersecurity goes. You can see them here on the screen. Wire fraud is one of the fastest growing cyber crimes in the US. And consumers need to understand the risks that exist within every real estate transaction. We'll talk about this in particular in a little bit, but when in doubt, pick up the phone and call whoever you are trying to get in contact with before transferring money. As real estate transactions become increasingly digital, cybercrime continues to get more and more creative in their efforts. We see this across the board, not just in real estate, but in small and medium-sized businesses. As you all know, there have been an increasing number of cyber attacks on small businesses in supply chains that reach up to larger companies. So cyber criminals know that the larger companies have the infrastructure in place to combat them a little bit better than the smaller guys, and they know where to find the weak links, and they go for it. 67% of SMBs failed to survive a cyber breach. This is a pretty high number, and SMBs covers a lot of not just real estate agents or companies, but it just covers pretty much everyone there, and the stat is pretty significant. 56% of organizations suffered a breach caused by a third party. You guys, many of you use email or payment processing systems, anything along those lines. Those are all considered third parties. If you're sharing your information with them or with another party that is not someone within your company, that is definitely considered a third party. So those are some very high level stats to get us started. And then I will dive right into a little bit of background around what the Cyber Readiness Institute does, and a little bit of our background about how we were created. So we were founded back in 2017, coming out of a commission from the Obama administration to address cybersecurity gaps within the US. And one of the major gaps that was discovered out of that commission was small and medium-sized businesses not having access to resources. So a couple of the large enterprise partners that were a part of that commission decided to put their money where their mouth was and create the Cyber Readiness Institute to help solve that gap. So the Cyber Readiness Institute is made up of these companies over here to the side: ExxonMobil, Center for Global Enterprise, Principal, MasterCard, Microsoft, and GM. We're not made up of them, but they do provide us the funding to be able to share free and accessible resources to small and medium-sized businesses. In addition to these large enterprises, we do also have partners that are small and medium-sized businesses, and also organizations that interact on a regular basis with small and medium-sized enterprises. And this level of partnership with CRI is called a champion, and they also help inform our content. So we're not just one-sided from the big enterprises. We also hear from day-to-day the small and medium-sized businesses that are working in the supply chains of these larger organizations, or just our mom and pop shop, whether you are a little pizza shop, or if you're a small bank, anything along those lines. We have had users go through our program and find value in it. So I will dive into a little bit about what our program consists of, and what some of our resources are. So all of our resources are focused on the human behavior side of things, as far as cybersecurity goes, and creating practical policies around these core 4 issues: authentication, patching, phishing, and USB and removable media use. We do have a flagship program called the Cyber Readiness Program. It takes anywhere from an hour and a half to 3 hours to complete, depending on your level of understanding of cybersecurity from the beginning and how many policies you already have in place. By going through our program, you will learn how to create practical policies around each of these core 4 issues. And then in addition to that, you will also learn how to create an incident response plan. Second step to that is also educating all of your employees on these policies that you are creating or modifying to be a little bit better and fit a very up-to-date type of system. Again, all of our materials focus on creating a cyber ready culture, which comes down to human behavior, because everyone knows that you can tell people all day to create a long password, but until you give them a reason why they should create a long password or a long complex passphrase, they're not going to do it. So helping your employees understand risk is really critical. So kind of talk around that a little bit. So cyber ready culture versus workaround culture. Policies that are impractical for hybrid workplace are just not going to work. If people don't know what they're supposed to do, they're not going to do it. If you allow exceptions for a majority of the people, other people will just be like, oh yeah, that doesn't matter. They let Sam over there use his USBs for anything he wanted, right? So you have to make sure you're getting buy-in from all of your employees throughout the process of creating your policies. So you also have to make sure that you're not using very technical language in order to tell your employees what you're doing. So there's two different ways to approach this. Really, it comes down to communicating with your employee base from top to bottom. And in the cyber readiness program, we encourage people to select a cyber leader because the cyber readiness program is for an organization. So from that, a cyber leader will go through the program and they will learn to get buy-in from their leadership in order to create these culture changes throughout the organization. And just because I think that this really is something that applies to the real estate world. Most of you have seen about ransomware attacks in the news, not necessarily this year, but very much last year and the year before. So in case you don't know what it is, I will go through some major bullet points around this. A ransomware attack is conducted by a malicious actor looking to hold an organization's data hostage for a ransom. So in the real estate world, you guys have a lot of access to people's information, their personal data, like their PII, their banking information. You hold contracts for various organizations. Again, the banking data is something that cyber criminals really want to get access to. You also have emails that have access to all of your contacts, which is also very interesting for a hacker. So don't ever think that you are too small to have anything that a hacker would want, because everyone's information, whether you think it is important or not, is somehow connected to something else, which is why we have these supply chain issues. Malicious actors can gain access through various means, including phishing, unpatched software, and visiting malicious or compromised websites. This again goes back to the core 4 that I mentioned that our program covers. We cover policies around phishing and education around phishing. Excuse me. Unpatched software. So we cover software updates and having a regular cadence for that, as well as employing automatic updates. Some companies I know perhaps don't encourage you to turn on automatic updates because they might have a sandbox that they test this in first and then push out updates. But some for the small businesses, they don't generally have that, and it's okay to just do automatic updates. And sometimes when there's this type of attack, there's data exfiltration, participation in DDoS attacks, and anti-detection components. So you may not know that you've been hit by a ransomware attack until it's too late. Impact from these ransomware attacks can be far-reaching and very much debilitating, as we saw with the meatpacking industry, or not meatpacking industry, but the meat company in the US not too long ago, as well as the Colonial Pipeline. All of these companies thought that they were just fine and they didn't really have anything that hackers would want, but they ended up causing major issues, not only for themselves, but for the rest of the US and the world. So I will cover a few tips around prevention and response for ransomware. Again, it comes back to cyber readiness being about people and their behavior. So it's great to employ cyber readiness into all of your training. And that's not just when an employee comes on board. This needs to be recurring training. And then also when you have an employee leave your company, it's really good to have a meeting with them at the end to make sure that everything is closed out. They're not taking passwords or anything along those lines, user accounts, or any proprietary company information with them when they depart. Develop good cyber habits, and you can learn more about those good cyber habits by going through the cyber readiness program. and create a culture of cyber readiness within the organization. Again, creating practical policies that people understand and understand the importance of. So I'm just going to mention that the Cyber Readiness Institute not only has our flagship program, the Cyber Readiness Program, we also stay up to date with issues that affect small and medium-sized businesses, such as ransomware. So we have quite a few resources available. And again, this is all totally for free. You can just go to our website, becyberready.com or the cyberreadinessinstitute.org to visit these resources. So we do have a resource that kind of dives into this a little bit more. But in general, to prepare for a ransomware attack, you need to create and test your backups. And patching your software is extremely critical. I'm not sure if you all remember WannaCry back from 2017, but much of the fallout from that was due to either legacy systems not being able to patch their software or people just not realizing that they should be patching their software. Having a phishing training plan, making sure all of your employees know not to click on suspicious links or open attachments from unknown senders, and have an incident response plan. And if you don't know what an incident response plan is, that's essentially a plan like a fire drill. When you have a fire drill, you know exactly where you need to go when an issue occurs, who you need to call, and things like that. So if you're unsure about that still, going through the CRI program really does help you create this incident response plan, and it's very customizable to your own company. So responding to a ransomware attack, removing the infected devices from your network, or not connecting to a new network if you suspect you have an issue. If there are tested backups, easy to do. You don't have to worry about even deciding if you're going to pay the ransom or not. You just can contact law enforcement, re-upload your backup, and you are good to go. In recovery, just with any attack or suspected attack, reset all user IDs and change passwords. Do a clean install from backups, update all software, restore data from backups, and ensure pre-event patches are still applied. So I'm just going to touch on the reset user IDs and change all passwords again, because this really does not just apply to ransomware attacks. If you receive a phishing email or you suspect that someone is maybe trying to get into your account, it never hurts to just update that password or passphrase. Ideally, NIST standards are, I believe, 9 characters or 8 characters. CRI recommends 15 characters, and a passphrase is something that's easy to remember, like the brown cow jumped over a fence, or something along those lines. Or my favorite baseball team is the Washington Nationals. Something that's easy to remember for you and is long and complex is really great to have for your password. A question I often get is around password managers or password keepers. There are a lot of options out there for that. And I would just say do your research and make sure that when you choose your password manager, if you decide to use one, that you make sure that your password to get into that password manager is also long and complex. Another question I get often is if it's okay to use the suggested passwords that Google or Firefox gives you. I would say, depending on the type of information that you are accessing with that password, use your judgment there. I would avoid maybe using that for banking info, but for things that are not connected to anything else, as long as you have a unique password for each of your accounts, my personal opinion is that it's okay. But again, you can determine your own risk for that. So developing good cyber habits. This is just kind of a slide that I'm going to wrap up on. Whenever you're maybe working in an office, I know many people are remote right now. Many of you are going and showing houses and things like that. But in general, log off your computer every time you step away from it. Use multi-factor authentication every day across all devices when available. And I'm going to just harp on this point real quick because, and I feel like I've been talking about passwords a lot this time, but multi-factor authentication is something that we have seen a lot. You all have it probably on your iPhone or your Android to access it. But basically, it's either a biometric or an additional password or sending another code to a different device or to your email. Many accounts have multi-factor authentication available. You just have to turn it on, whether it's your Instagram, your LinkedIn, your Gmail, your Office 365. And a lot of people don't know that this is available, but really just go into your settings or do a quick Google search around how you can turn it on, because it's a really easy thing to do. And Microsoft released a stat not too long ago that I think 99% of cyber breaches could have been prevented by multi-factor authentication, which really shows you how effective it is. So having a long, complex, unique passphrase plus multi-factor authentication should save you on the password front. Again, strengthen your passwords, one each day. So maybe you use the same password that you've used since high school on some accounts that you don't really care about. But that is fine until one of them gets hacked, and then potentially you have an old email that has two-factor authentication for one of your other email accounts, and a hacker has access to your old password, and they're smart and they're creative and they figure out unique ways to access your information that you would not even think of. So try to keep all of your passwords unique, and just take it one step at a time. You can't make all the changes in one day. Verify that you have backups and test your backups. This applies for anything that is company related, and especially anything that will affect your business continuity. So contracts, invoices, things like that, you definitely need to make sure you have backups of that. Your email, so you have your communications and your contacts, because I know that's really important for the real estate industry. And then just kind of a fun ending note, if you are a cyber leader and you're trying to drive change within your organization, ask one person each day how they're doing with their cyber readiness habits. This is, of course, after you've gone through the program and you've created these policies and you're trying to implement change within your organization. So I will pause here for any questions. I think I saw a couple in the chat. We have one in the chat. Or I'll just read it out loud. If I save my password on my device so I don't have to remember it, can hackers see that? Is it safe to do that? So I would say, unless you have some very sneaky lurker on your device, it's probably okay to do that. But again, I would say maybe avoid doing that with really proprietary information or your banking account information. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Matthew.
No, I think you covered that just right. Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Great. And then I see another question on here. Where can companies get more info on cyber insurance? Cindy, this is honestly a really great question, and a question that CRI has been trying to address, because for small and medium-sized businesses, even up to like slightly larger companies, cyber insurance is really confusing, and it's hard to get straightforward answers on what you should and shouldn't have. And many larger organizations require you to have cyber insurance in order to work with them. So stay tuned for more information coming from CRI around cyber insurance. We have had a couple panels in the past that cover some general questions, but that is definitely an issue that we're looking into. There are some companies out there that focus on small and medium-sized business cyber insurance. So you can just kind of do a quick Google search. But if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to me after this and I can give you a little bit more information. And Cindy, yes, for your passwords to logging in. It's okay for general things, but I would say keep your banking info private and maybe don't save that. And I think that we have a couple questions in the Q&A as well. How can we check our applications for security flaws if we don't have a tech team for that? What is my recommendation, or what is your recommendation on this topic? So there are resources out there for that. I would say CRI does not have any specific recommendations for that. Matthew, I don't know if you have anything there.
Yeah, I think you can get them off the shelf. Really, there are quite a few applications out there to protect your systems. Of course, they vary in price and functionality, and you kind of have to find your fit in that space. But they have different plans. I know what, from our organization's perspective, we have a really good package that that serves us really well. But it's about just Googling it, really. I think there's a lot out there. And reviewing it like you would do anything else, really. And on the insurance side, I think it's worth talking to your normal business insurance, actually. They might have an additional cybersecurity insurance policy that you can add to it and look into that.
And then Matthew, I think you should probably take this next question as well, around what steps should we take to protect the VOW property data in our brokerage office?
Good question. I see the protection bit and the cybersecurity bit has kind of two phases. One is really the hard technical protection, and the CRI has great tools already, kind of free, and I think that helps a lot. And yes, you need to probably buy some technical solutions to protect your desktops and workstations and servers. But I think even more important than that is really the training aspect that you mentioned, because really I think the most vulnerable bit in your organization is not so much the technology. I think it's the human. And it's also the easiest way to get into that data and cause some harm. So really, regardless going to the gym or doing exercise and keeping fit, just staying aware is a really big deal. And that's how we see it as well at Stellar. And we have a fully fledged program around cybersecurity awareness training with our staff that goes through regular testing, essentially. So by sending fake phishing emails, for example, and seeing who clicks on it, and then that person unfortunately gets a little bit extra training, and continuously checking, and then educating training in a meaningful way. I hope that helped.
So the next question on here is, based on cybersecurity, what can an individual do to protect our phones and computer, especially us that do not speak the language? And I think that you're talking about the nerdy techie language of cybersecurity. So again, it really goes back to those core 4 issues that I talked about. Make sure your software, your phones, your computer is all up to date. Because as soon as a company or software company releases an update, hackers are getting that information as well. So they know that there's people out there that are not updating their computer within 24 hours of getting that update. So they're going to start hammering out emails and other types of malicious attacks to try to target those vulnerabilities. Same thing with your phones. Try not to click on random text message links or emails that come through your phone that you don't know who they're from. Sometimes images also have malicious attachments to them, so avoid clicking or opening any images that you don't know who they're from. And then just really keeping all of your passwords unique and long and complex. One quick point that I've not really touched on too much, I just mentioned earlier on, for keeping your computer safe as well, try to avoid putting USBs or connecting to devices that you don't know about, just because it's not necessarily likely, but there's a chance that there could be malicious software on that device that could infect your computer. But again, most of those malicious exploits and things like that are targeting vulnerabilities that should be fixed via software updates. And Matthew, I'll turn it over to you to add anything else to that.
No, I think that's pretty much it for my, yeah.
Okay.
I'll take the next one though, because it is directed at me. So how should we clean the digital footprints of a sold listing on the net for privacy reasons of the new owner? And this person has a request like this. Can this be done automatically? It's a tricky question, because the listing was, or the real estate data was advertised essentially before the owner took over. So it's like any other marketing material really that's out there, and not private at the time of publishing, and then retracting all that information is nearly impossible. That's the unfortunate part of it. I totally understand it. It's not uncommon that we have this kind of request, hey, we need to retract that information. All we can do is we can ask those outlets that we work with, so where we distribute our data to do so. But it's not, I don't think there's actually a legal pathway to do so, just because it's like any other marketing material at the time of marketing that went out. And at the time it was marketed, it was that previous owner's material, or the previous listing agents. So it's certainly not automatically, very manual at this point in time, and certainly not easy, unfortunately. I wish I had a better answer to that. Okay.
All right. And the next question I'm seeing on here is, having McAfee security enough? That is an interesting question. I would say that it is definitely a good thing to have McAfee security. But in addition to having that, having policies, I don't know if you're a business owner or if you're an employee, or what kind of pull you have within your company, but making sure you have policies in place around acceptable use and things like that is really important. As well as making sure that you're keeping that McAfee security updated. I'm hammering that point home, but keeping that updated is really important. There are a lot of options out there. You can spend a lot of money on security software and other types of devices and things like that. But at the end of the day, the 4 issues that I've mentioned, you're probably getting tired of hearing about it by now, but the keeping long, unique passwords or passphrases, software updates, not clicking on links, and not putting random USB devices into your computer will cover 90-ish% of all of the attacks that you might face as a smaller, medium-sized business. But depending, there's always that 5% or more that could, if there's an adversary that's really trying to get at your information, there's sometimes not much you can do. But McAfee security at a fundamental level is really good, as long as you have policies and you're educating your workforce around acceptable use.
Do you want to take the next one too?
Sure. Should I not pay my bills from my phone? That's a good question. Because I said at the very beginning, when in doubt, pick up the phone and call someone. But that being said, I talked about phishing, and I talked a little bit about text message phishing as well. There is another level of that called vishing, or which is voicemail or voice phishing. So if you are getting a phone call randomly about a bill that you thought you might have paid, in general, don't pay if somebody calls you. Make sure you're like, okay, fine, I get it. I probably do need to pay my phone bill or my cable bill. Hang up the phone. They get paid anyway. Go to the actual website to find the phone number that is legitimate for whatever company you're trying to pay the bill for. And then call that number direct and say, hey, I got a call about needing to pay a bill. Was this legitimate or not? And they will tell you yes or no, and then move forward like that. This happened to me with a company trying to pose as Apple, or a hacker trying to pose as Apple right after I bought my new iPhone. And they called and told me that my old phone had some issue with my login, and they were trying to get my Apple ID. And basically I was like, this is not normal. So I hung up and I called Apple directly. And I told them the number that was called from, and they were like, thanks for reporting this. We've had multiple other users report this as well. So in general, companies appreciate too if you do get a strange phone call.
Yeah, and to your point, it's better you called up than they calling you. I think that's the key here. I usually get around tax return time lots of calls about, you know, me going to jail sometime soon because I haven't paid tax and I need to pay something right away. So that's, yeah, I would just watch out for that for sure. Always make the call rather than receiving and doing something over the phone. I think I'll take the next one. We often, so Jane asks that users are often asked to grant permissions to the private data each time you visit websites. Can you get attacked through this? And then if yes, how can you go back and disagree with the terms? It's actually quite interesting because there's a lot of regulation actually around that, depending on where you are. Europe, California, Canada actually are stricter on that front, much stricter than most of the US, where you have to grant actual permission to very specific things that are collected when you are on a website. And there should be, on the website itself, there should be a way to basically go into those settings and revert that. You can kind of switch them off as well. So there is a way to undo it. And my recommendation is always, or my policy, personal policy almost, is to give as little as possible. Unless you want customized ads next time you go to another website or so. Can you get attacked through it? It depends on the website, I think. So if you do think it's a common, well-known website, look at the URL. It's probably safe to say they're collecting a lot of information to aggregate and build a profile of yours in some form or shape, or trace you through your journey through the internet. But if it's not a very common one, or something that's not, if you're in the dark areas, then maybe not. That's what I would say. What do you think, Leslie?
I would agree with that. Unless it's been corrupted already, most likely that website is just trying to collect data for ads or contacting you again in the future.
Okay.
All right. So the next question, I'll just read it out loud and we can decide. Amir asks, since cyber attacks on companies start with one individual's actions or reaction to whatever phishing email or another factor, how does a real estate company transform its employees into human firewalls to build a better defense against cyber attacks on companies? I'll turn this over to you first, Matthew, and then I'll jump in after.
Sure. Going back to that original point I had, it's a very good point, Amir. You want to build your human firewall, and I think that is your most vulnerable point. And it's really about that awareness and training. So CRI, for example, has a lot of materials for exactly that reason. If I were you, let's say I'm a very small business, I don't have a lot of money to do, then yes, I'm going to start just by the simple, cost-effective things, free materials out there, and start building a policy. Let's say every month there's a training session or a regular awareness session that I would have with my staff if I wanted to go down that route. But that would be a very cost-effective way to really mitigate a lot of the risk. Because again, the vast majority of those attacks happen through phishing. Really the vast majority. And so if you can address that as a high priority by ensuring your staff is trained, your team is well aware that, you know, before you click on the link, hover over it and check where it's going to lead you to before you actually click into. What is the actual original email address it's coming from? Is it something I expect? It's a little bit going to the mail and snail mail and looking at it, saying, do you expect that email? Do you expect that snail mail even? That's where I would go with this. This is how would be my approach.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And in general, it comes down to awareness and education, making sure you know what is normal and what is not, and then having policies around what you do whenever you notice something is not normal. So that's how I would say that you can create human firewalls, because firewalls have rules. Whenever they see something that is not normal, they flag you, just like your employees should do as well.
And maybe one more point that you actually made, Leslie, earlier about being practical about it, right? Cybersecurity is maybe not the most interesting topic for a lot of people to learn about and to go through a training. So if you can make that engaging in any form or fashion, it goes a long way. Like with any topic that might not be, you know, the most interesting or entertaining one. If you can make it, that makes a big difference. Right, the next one is Natalie. Are there any additional procedures we need to follow during online transactions to ensure that we are safe? Leslie, do you have an idea on that one?
In general, if we're just talking in general, CRI recommends that you try to use credit cards, like if you're doing some sort of online transaction rather than a debit card, just because it is easier for credit cards to refund credit rather than an actual debit where it's pulling out of your bank account. Other than that, just make sure you're working through a reputable site. Check the URL. Let's say you went to, I don't know, Walmart.com. Make sure it's not like wall with one of the L's corrected as a 1.com, right? If that makes any sense. Hackers are really good at making lookalike websites and things like that, and they really do a good job of making it look just like the actual website. So just be aware, use your brain. If something looks a little bit fishy, maybe don't move forward with that transaction. Or at the end of the day, again, you can always call to make sure that you're on the right site or a reputable site and actually talk to a human. Do you have anything else to add around that?
No, spot on. Yeah.
Cool. I actually do have one more. CRI does have a retailer's guide. We release it usually around holidays, but you can find that on our resources page, and it kind of talks around some of the procedures for that. And the next question is back over to you, which is what would potential threats in showing listing, or what would be potential threats in showing listings?
That's a good question, Simon. I think the showing aspect obviously lends itself to getting into a private area of a person, right? Starting with even scheduling a showing, even with fellow realtors and their buyers, you really want to ensure that you expose kind of the access codes, any kind of the alarm code, those kind of things only when you really need to. That's where that starts. And then during the showing itself, of course, somebody might have a Wi-Fi password hanging around somewhere on a post-it. Those kind of things I would just watch out for, that before you show something, don't necessarily expose more critical items of that homeowner to the general public. That's what I would see as a potential threat for showing listings. I haven't had any incidences per se that I can recall around that, but alarm codes, yeah, those kind of things we do follow through if there's something like this comes up. Okay, next one. In a brokerage office, how many percentage of our IT budget should be assigned for cybersecurity? That's a good question. I don't think I have a good answer for that, what that amount should be. It, I think again, it has to be within reason. You cannot spend blow your budget on cybersecurity. It just doesn't. It's to do with assessing the probability of the risk and the impact. And it can be as simple as making a little matrix. There's lots of information actually out there on how likely something can happen to you. And then say, okay, I'm going to assign this much, I'm going to invest this much into it. And I would say start small, see where it goes and grow as you grow. Leslie, do you have any more kind of advice from experience maybe, or from the industry?
Yes. So I think that your advice about starting small is great. And I would just say, just go to the cyberreadinessinstitute.org, go through our program and see what you can look at there that could maybe help you. And we really do cover a lot of the issues that you would face for free. There are also other organizations out there other than CRI. The Global Cyber Alliance has a really good toolkit for small and medium-sized businesses to help augment their IT team for cybersecurity. And I'm not actually sure if this is public or not, but I think it is, the MasterCard Trust Center. And I'll put the links in the chat. But all three of those resources are really great for small teams that are looking for ways that they can implement cybersecurity without breaking the bank.
Great. Maurizio. Okay, Maurizio's asking, every time he goes to a new site, he gets the warning that there are some cookies being created for his profile. Can these cookies include worms or viruses? Again, I would say, depending on the site. And here's the thing. If the site's really not a major site or something that's well known out there, they are telling you it's a cookie, but how do you know it's a cookie? It could be something else, right? So stay on the cautious side in general, but generally speaking, on a safe side, the cookies are really just to track you through the internet and show you ads that are relevant to you.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yep, we kind of covered that a little bit before when it comes to clicking the I accept this on a site. There's a small chance, but just make sure you're on a legitimate site.
That's
right. Thank you, Matthew and Leslie, for your responses so far to audience questions. A reminder to audience, keep the questions coming. We have approximately 10 more minutes in our webinar today. You can submit questions through the Zoom Q&A or chat functions. There's a few more questions that I'll read to our panel here. Coming from Peggy. While we are trying to keep ourselves cyber secure, the digital world transforms very fast and new ways of cyber attacks are emerging. How can we keep up with such updates and deal with them?
This is one for Leslie, I think. But my suggestion is really it's like going to the gym, and if you want to stay fit, you just have to put the effort into it. And yes, it's maybe not the most exciting thing to do, but if you make a habit out of it, I think you'll be in top shape.
I would agree with that. It comes down to a culture shift. So making sure you understand the risks of not doing certain things and convincing yourself to make sure you're making those smart cyber decisions every day. I would agree that it's very much like going to the gym, making healthy choices, healthy, like hygienic cyber choices. Cyber hygiene is a word that is thrown around quite often. We choose to say cyber ready because you can never be fully clean because there's always something that could sneak through if an adversary wants to get to.
This question is coming from Barbara. What suggestions do you have for posting video advertising on Facebook? I'm thinking in a secure way.
So from my perspective, as long as you are protecting both your information and your client's information, there's no reason you shouldn't use Facebook advertising. It's a really good tool. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Matthew.
No, it always comes down to how much are you going to share, really, whether it's for your own things or somebody else's that are in your video, because really once it's out there, it's basically impossible to take it away. And if you're okay with that, then that's totally fine. There is, I think in Europe there is that they set up the right to forget that they try to implement, and I think they are doing this so that, you know, if you, let's say, have a bad record, bad public record or something, and you can ask Google to take it away. But that's a huge undertaking. That's not the norm. So I think it's safe to answer the question.
Yeah, I would agree.
We have some questions about the recording of this webinar. Just a reminder that the recording will be available after the conclusion on the Realtyna website, as well as Facebook and YouTube. A couple more questions. Based on your experience with real estate agents, what is your suggestion to raise awareness, especially among non-technical agents, to make them more cyber secure?
Is the one for Leslie? Leslie, do you want to go at it, or do you want me to?
To make them more cyber secure, I would say just follow and really get policies in place around the core 4 issues around passwords, software updates, phishing, and USB and removable media use. Just make sure your employees know what is going on as far as these policies go within your organization. And then also just make them understand the risks if they don't follow those policies.
Absolutely, yeah. And here's the thing: the fact that you're actually in this webinar is really the first step that you've already taken, and you already know about now CRI, and they have lots of free resources there. So take the plunge and start with that. And I think you're already ahead of most people, really.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to recall any specific examples of cybersecurity incidents involving the real estate sector and how agents coped with that situation, Leslie or Matthew?
I'll turn that over to you first.
Sure. Not with agents per se. I mean, we had with our vendors. So this is not Stellar. This was my previous role in in an association in Canada, where one of my staff received a text message, smishing or SMS smishing attack from the CEO, and the CEO asked that staff to go to Best Buy and buy a gift voucher, because they needed urgently to give it to some sort of in an event to a director. So that analyst, went ahead. Of course, it's a text message from the CEO. How can you not immediately act on it? And it seems urgent. And went ahead to Best Buy, was at the counter about to pay, and then got another message saying, "Hey, after you pay, just scratch off the back and tell me, send me the number, the code." And thankfully, at that point, he actually called me and said, "Hey, Matthew, do you know where our CEO is? What something seems odd?" And I was like, "What are you doing in Best Buy? Come back to the office." So we got away with that one. And it's a small incident, but think a bit larger. It's really easy, right? And that I think the lesson from that is a threat usually tries to get into to tackle that exactly, right? You're always trying to pretend this to be the CFO or the CEO, and getting to the employees that feel that pressure, right? That's why the human part is the weakest part. Systems don't really care. They have policies in place. They have permissions in place. So systems can be patched, but the humans are vulnerable to feelings and careers and etc. So that was one of the incidents that we came across. We also had some check fraud at one point where somebody would, somehow the check was copied and checked in actually, but the bank covered in the end. Lots of little things that can happen. Really. For now, it's been reasonably good, nothing major, but I've seen definitely an increase in those kind of incidents.
Thank you, Matthew. The modern real estate industry uses a lot of technologies, and I'm wondering which category needs the most attention for real estate agents in terms of cybersecurity? Personal computers or gadgets, their online presence, digital footprint?
Do you want to go, Leslie, or do you want me to?
Sure. Yeah, I can jump in. I would say that every level of it needs some sort of attention, because if you ignore any one part, hackers will choose to go for the weakest link. Generally, if a company has pretty hardened security, the human is the weakest link, just like Matthew just said a second ago around the humans having the feelings, and they're more prone to mistakes than machines are. So as long as we are doing our part, or you are doing your part in keeping your software up to date, not clicking on silly links, not transferring money because your supposed CFO told you to, even though you had no idea that was coming and it seemed kind of out of the blue. All of those things are places where hackers would choose to take advantage of. So there's not just one piece of it that can be ignored or focused on for the most part.
Yeah, that would have been my answer too. There is no single point that you can ignore really or give into. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're about to run out of time for our webinar. So I just want to ask Leslie and Matthew if you have any final few words to add about cybersecurity in real estate before we wrap up.
Sure.
This is just a personal suggestion. I use a website called Have I Been Owned or Pawned? .com. Leslie, I know you're
Yes,
I really like
great.
it. So what it does is I can post it in as well. Basically, you put in your email address, and whenever there's a large breach happening that exposes a lot of email addresses and passwords, they will send you an email saying, hey, your password is likely exposed. Why don't you change it? So I've had a few of those coming to my inbox and really just prompted me to start changing things around. It's a great reminder.
I really do like that website a lot. And if you're guilty like me about still using some of your high school passwords, now that will also tell you when those high school passwords have been exposed, so you can make sure you're changing them. I think I'd just like to leave everyone on the note that the Cyber Readiness Institute's resources are free. Feel free to use me as a resource. I'm here to help you. I posted my contact info to the chat, and you'll also be getting a recording of this. But again, every part of cybersecurity really starts from the human behavior side and creating practical policies around issues that are important to any organization. And I'm sure you all could probably tell them right back to me right now. So I'm not going to cover those core 4 issues. But either way, creating practical policies and really encouraging your employees to understand and take action on those practical policies is the most important part of cybersecurity, I think.
Okay. Thank you to all of you who have joined us for this conversation, and a special thanks to our panelists, Matthew and Leslie, for their time and extensive expertise. This will conclude our webinar on cybersecurity in the real estate industry. We will see you next time.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Let's see. Thanks for having me.